You're watching All 24 News World News Program, and up next are tonight's top stories. The United States bombs key Iranian oil hub. Trump is threatening more strikes, and Iran is vowing to turn American facilities in the region to ashes. Also coming up, Iran says it will start using more advanced weapons. Meanwhile, the US is reporting a rise in its troop deaths, and Tehran claims it has struck military and financial sites in the Gulf. Coming up in our news as well, the US is sending its Navy to escort oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump is calling for an international coalition to help secure it. And Iran says it might allow passage, but only for cargo sold in yuan. And later on, 12 doctors and paramedics have been killed in an Israeli strike in southern Lebanon. The UN chief warns the area could become uninhabitable. And with nearly 1 million people displaced, 8 groups say a humanitarian crisis is unfolding. Welcome back. First off in our news tonight, the United States says it bombed military targets on Iran's strategic Kurg island in strikes President Donald Trump called the most powerful in the Middle East history. Zarfarjani has the full story.
A fortnight into the war, tensions are still rising in the Middle East after the United States carried out major airstrikes on Kurg Island, a key hub for Iran's oil exports. While Washington says the strikes targeted military sites, Tehran warns of retaliation if its energy facilities are attacked. US President Donald Trump said the United States Central Command conducted what he described as one of the strongest air raids in the region's history, claiming military targets on the island were completely destroyed.
The US Central Command has carried out one of the strongest airstrikes in the history of the Middle East, destroying every military target on Iran's cross jewel, Kurg Island. I chose not to destroy the oil infrastructure, but if Iran interferes with the free passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, I will reconsider that decision.
Iranian media, including Fars News Agency, reported around 15 explosions, but said the island's oil infrastructure, which handles most of Iran's exports, was not damaged. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi warned that any attack on Iran's energy facilities would trigger retaliation.
Iran will respond to any attack on its energy facilities. If Iranian installations are targeted, our forces will target American companies in the region or companies in which the United States holds stakes. The attack on Kurg Island was launched from neighboring territories, and US HIMARS missiles were fired from nearby states.
Meanwhile, Iranian authorities reported 6 people killed in renewed strikes in western Iran, while the Wall Street Journal cited Pentagon sources saying 13 US soldiers have been killed and about 200 injured since the start of the US campaign on February 28th. With strikes continuing and warnings of retaliation growing, tensions between Washington and Tehran are deepening, raising concerns over the security of the Strait of Hormuz and the stability of global energy supplies.
US President Donald Trump vows a massive bombing campaign along Iran's coast, warning Washington will keep targeting and sinking Iranian boats and ships.
We will continue heavy bombing of the coastline and constantly strike Iranian boats and ships, and we will make the Strait of Hormuz safe soon. We have destroyed 100% of Iran's capabilities, but it is easy for them to send a drone, plant a mine, or launch a short-range missile.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps threatens to target shipping ports and U.S. military bases in several UAE cities. A spokesman for Khatam al-Anbiya calls on authorities to evacuate U.S. ports and docks in the UAE, describing them as legitimate targets used to launch missiles at Iran's Abu Musa and Kurg Islands. Bloomberg reports oil operations at Fujairah port were briefly halted after a drone strike sparked a fire. Authorities say the blaze was caused by debris from an intercepted drone and no injuries were reported. Meanwhile, international media say a U.S. oil tanker caught fire near Sharqa after a suspected attack on ships in the Gulf.
بسم الله قاسم الجبارین.
In the name of God, the destroyer of the tyrants, the invading American army, due to the destruction of its military bases in the region, under the cover of the ports, docks, and hideouts of the cities of the United Arab Emirates, has targeted the Iranian island of Abu Musa with its missiles.
Iran's military vows to turn U.S. oil and energy facilities in the Middle East to ashes. At a press conference Saturday, Operations spokesman Ibrahim Zulfaghari says Tehran will respond to Donald Trump's threat to strike Karg Island by targeting U.S. energy facilities and those of its allies across the region. During the holy month of Ramadan, Tehran endures the early U.S. bombardment, but residents stay resilient. Daily life goes on, with supplies arriving before iftar and authorities monitoring some businesses amid the conflict. Karim Mustafa reports now.
After 2 weeks of aggression and rising tensions, life in Tehran seems to be going on almost as usual. Residents are determined to observe Ramadan as normally as possible. This, despite the constant attacks and widespread rumors suggesting that the capital has become a ghost town.
Daily life is mostly the same as before. It's true that some people have left Tehran, perhaps because they lived near military bases. But many are still here, especially in our neighborhoods. They haven't left and are continuing their lives normally.
I work at the refinery and I still go back to work despite all the circumstances. More than 90% of the staff are still at their posts.
As the time to break the fast draws near, Tehran's streets become livelier. Restaurant and food stalls begin to fill with customers preparing for iftar. However, although many restaurants remain open, the war has clearly impacted their businesses.
Every day we feel afraid. We go to work with that fear in our hearts. Because of the recent events, the number of customers has decreased somewhat. Even so, our workplace is still busier than many others.
Business and people's livelihood have been seriously affected. Many shops have closed, and some people have moved to smaller towns. There are far fewer customers now, even for home deliveries. In fact, we've had a lot of cancellations.
As the U.S. Zionist bombardment enters its second week, many citizens have chosen to leave the capital for security concerns. Others, however, are hoping that the escalation will soon come to an end and peace will return.
Iran's defense ministry says the next phase of Operation True Promise 4 will use advanced high-precision weapons. On Saturday, the 49th wave combined drones with Qadr Imad and Khaybar missiles carrying cluster warheads striking U.S. and Zionist targets, including Israeli occupation's Amman military intelligence, cyber unit 8200 and a fighter jet gathering. Iran's military is claiming a major win. A top general says the USS Abraham Lincoln, the largest American warship, has been taken out of service. He claims the carrier fled the region after being targeted by Iranian forces. General Abul Fazl Shakarshi also warns regional countries not to rely on the United States, according to Iranian media reports.
Do not trust the illusory power of America. Americans who cannot even defend their own weakened forces will not be able to guarantee the security of Islamic countries or the region. The largest American warship has been neutralized by the power of the Muslim state of Iran and was forced to withdraw from the area of operations in what we consider a historic defeat. This U.S. aircraft carrier has begun its journey back toward the United States.
Iran's defense ministry says it targeted U.S.-linked military and financial sites across the Gulf region. Attacks hit Patriot missile batteries, a control tower, and air defense shelters at a Dhafra air base in the UAE, plus aircraft hangars and fuel tanks at Sheikh Isa air base in Bahrain. Branches of the American banks in Dubai and Manama, along with equipment depots and helicopter storage at the Udeid air base in Kuwait, were also struck. President Donald Trump says the U.S. Navy will start escorting oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz as soon as possible. Speaking Friday, Trump told reporters the operation is coming very soon. His goal is to push back against Iran's efforts to choke off the world's oil supply and squeeze global economy. Iran has effectively shut the Strait since March 1st, disrupting one of the world's most critical energy waterways.
President, when will the Navy start escorting tankers to the Straits of Hormuz? How long now do you think the war is likely to last?
I can't tell you that. I mean, I have my own idea, but what good does it do? It'll be as long as it's necessary. They've been decimated. Their country's in bad shape. The whole thing is collapsing.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump urges China, France, Japan, South Korea, and Britain and others to send warships to secure the Strait of Hormuz. On Saturday, he pledged to make the strait safe one way or another, calling for international cooperation to protect global shipping.
The United States of America has beaten and completely decimated Iran, both militarily, economically, and in every other way. But the countries of the world that receive oil through the Hormuz Strait must take care of that passage, and we will help a lot.
Speaking of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran is floating a possible deal to let some oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz under one condition: payment in Chinese yuan, not in US dollars. A senior official tells CNN this is part of Tehran's new plan to manage traffic through the strategic waterway. Most global oil trades in dollars. Sanctioned Russian oil is the exception, sometimes sold in rubles or yuan. The strait remains effectively closed since March 1st, with tensions escalating after U.S. Zionist strikes. The UN warns any shipping restrictions could hammer humanitarian operations in the region. Oil prices surged past $100 a barrel this week as tensions spike in the Gulf and shipping through the Strait of Hormuz remains disrupted. Brent crude rose to $103, up more than 11% for the week, while NYMEX crude hit nearly $99, climbing 8.6% following last week's sharp jumps amid threats of intensified U.S. strikes on Iran. The Trump administration announced 172 million barrels of oil will be released from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, starting with 86 million barrels through a swap program. The Department of Energy says the supply will hit markets by next week, part of a global effort to release 400 million barrels to ease record high fuel prices and the shipping slowdown in the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, air freight costs have surged up to 70% since the Middle East conflict began, driven by airspace closures, halted routes, and soaring jet fuel prices. Spot rates from South Asia to Europe jumped to $4.37 per kilogram from $2.57, while shipments to North America rose 58% to $6.41 per kilogram. Europe to Middle East routes increased 55%, reaching $2.79 per kilogram. Lebanon's health ministry reports at least 12 people killed, including doctors and paramedics, in a Zionist airstrike on a medical center in Binj-Bil-Tar Governorate. Rescue operations continue, and the ministry notes this follows Friday's strike in Aswan and Abadia district, which killed 2 and wounded 5. Since March 26, medical personnel have been killed and 51 wounded.
A volunteer team was providing humanitarian services to civilians when Israeli forces struck the center. It's used to serve between 50,000 and 70,000 patients every month and played a vital role in the area. We appeal to the state to help us find an alternative facility, as no other center here can provide these services.
In a similar note, at least 12 Lebanese, including children, were killed in a Zionist airstrike on Saturday. In Nabatia, a couple and their 4 children, including an infant, died in a Friday night strike. In Burj Hammoud, Mount Lebanon, 1 person was killed and 4 wounded. while a strike in Sidon claimed at least 4 lives early Saturday. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warns southern Lebanon is becoming uninhabitable amid ongoing Zionist attacks. Speaking in Beirut Saturday, he urged the Zionist occupation to respect Lebanon's sovereignty and called for an end to strikes on UNIFIL forces, citing violations of international law.
When I was High Commissioner for Refugees, I saw the generosity of the Lebanese receiving so many Syrians, so many Palestinians. And today, it really breaks my heart to see the Lebanese people suffering so much. 800,000 displaced, 1,500 dead, in an absolutely dramatic situation. And my message is very clear. We must stop this war.
1 million displaced, 1 in 7 Lebanese, a nation in crisis. The government has turned its largest stadium into a shelter. More than 800 people now sleep on concrete beneath the stands. No beds, no privacy, just survival. Sofian Kanturi reports this time.
Under the concrete sands of the stadium in Beirut, dozens of tents now replace what used to be cheering crowds. For hundreds of displaced families, the sports venue has become a last refuge after days spent sleeping on the streets and sidewalks. Since the renewed Zionist aggression against Lebanon, authorities have rushed to convert schools and public institutions into emergency shelters capable of hosting around 120,000 people, but the number of displaced surged to nearly 1 million. The government was forced to open stadiums and places for worship to receive families fleeing the violence.
We have to now focus and target, on the life-saving. What is important also in a crisis is to not drop the work that is done to strengthen the resilience, whether that's in school feeding more broadly or in promoting livelihoods more broadly. I mean, what's important for the social cohesion here is as well that, it's host communities that are also supported, not only those who have to flee, and that the refugee response, for example, of Syrian refugees can continue. I mean, and here we are now having to make sharp priorities around the most immediate needs. And that, can be okay over a few weeks, but not over time.
As the wave of displacement grows, humanitarian organizations warn they are struggling to keep pace with rapidly rising needs. 8 groups say the situation is approaching a critical point.
The humanitarian system has done their work in terms of tapping into every efficiency there is. We have done our targeting, so we're only targeting those who are really, on the verge of starvation or in starvation. There isn't any more margin. And so with needs going up, resources will have to come up, and they can certainly not.
According to the International Organization for Migration, more than 822,000 people have been registered as displaced since the escalation began. Of them, over 128,000 are currently living in collective shelters run by the government. Around 600 shelters remain active across the country, many already full or nearing maximum capacity. And as Zionist airstrikes intensify across several regions of Lebanon, even these crowded shelters are struggling to provide safety, leaving thousands of displaced families caught between the violence of war and the harsh realities of displacement.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan warns that the Zionist occupation could carry out a new genocide in Lebanon under the pretext of targeting Hezbollah. Speaking Saturday, he said Iran denied launching missiles toward Turkey, and Ankara is reviewing discrepancies between Tehran's claims and technical data. And in the file of Gaza tonight, 3 Palestinians, including a woman, were killed by Zionist fire in Gaza on Saturday. A woman was shot near Maghazi camp, while 2 others died in a drone strike on displaced people in Khan Yunis. Gaza's health ministry says the ongoing attacks have killed 658 and wounded 1,754, with hospitals receiving 7 mortars and 3 wounded on Saturday alone. Since October 7, 2023, the toll has risen to 72,234 dead and 171,852 wounded. They survived the bombs in Gaza. Now displaced Palestinians fear they are being forgotten. A fragile ceasefire holds, but with global attention shifting to the conflict with Iran, many worry their suffering is fading from view. More on this story with Salman Asib.
Amid the ruins of Gaza during Ramadan, the men of a Najjar family walk with their children through the rubble to attend Friday prayers held in a makeshift tent serving as a mosque on the grounds of a destroyed school. Meanwhile, the women prepare modest iftar to break the day's fast, a simple meal of salad and vegetable noodle soup with barely enough protein to share.
The Iran war will have a significant impact because we will be forgotten by the countries that want to help us and those who want to remove the rebel. We were just dreaming about how rebel at our houses will be removed ahead of reconstruction so that we could regain hope that by next year, by next Ramadan, we would be in our homes. But the war on Iran doesn't signal anything good much.
Rima Najjar hopes that by next Ramadan her family will have returned home, but with international attention now focused on Iran, she feels that Gaza will be forgotten.
When we miss our home, we go to have iftar on the top of the rubble of the house. We place our food and remember the good days. Today, there are no good days. Today, there is suffering, tents, rots, fire and smoke. We see a lot of suffering.
At sunset, several members of the family gather on the roof of their destroyed home to break their fast together. Like many people in Gaza, they are enduring extremely difficult conditions during this sacred month. In Gaza, little has changed despite the ceasefire, with border crossing closed, a deepening humanitarian crisis, and regional tensions rising. Palestinians in Gaza are observing Ramadan amid their ruins, fearing they may be abandoned by the world.
Algerian Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the People's National Army General Said Chingriha praised recent counterterrorism operations in Tbista, east of Algeria, aimed at eradicating remaining terrorist groups. The Thursday-Friday operation eliminated 7 terrorists and seized weapons, ammunition, and other equipment. Army General Chingriha inspected the troops on Saturday, urging continued vigilance and honoring those martyred, praising their sacrifice and dedication. Let's catch up on more international news stories making headlines in the News in Brief.
A Russian missile and drone attack on Kiev killed 4 people and injured 15. The strikes damaged homes, schools, businesses, and critical infrastructure in 4 districts. North Korea fired around 10 ballistic missiles towards the Sea of Japan. According to South Korean military, the missiles were launched from near Pyongyang. Interim Venezuelan leader Delcy Rodriguez has asked U.S. President Donald Trump to totally lift the sanctions imposed on her country as the 2 countries begin to restore diplomatic ties. Next month, Bahrain and Saudi Arabian Formula One Grand Prix will be cancelled due to the conflict in the Middle East. Organizers said the decision was made to ensure the safety of teams, staff, and fans.
And that's all for tonight. Thank you for tuning in. Do take care.